Hey gang, welcome to Facts in Firearms channel. My name is Massad Ayoob and I'll be your host today. Tradition demands that we ask you to hit the like button if you like us, that you ring the bell for future notifications, and basically what we're going to do today is talk about the four primary formats available on revolvers, particularly compact concealed carry revolvers, and why I, for one, ultimately wound up with one particular type. The four essentially are double action with exposed hammer and hammer spur, as seen on this Colt Cobra. Double action, but with a bobbed hammer, the so-called spurless hammer, seen here on a Colt Detective Special. The shrouded hammer, seen here on the original Smith & Wesson Bodyguard Series, this being the Model 38 Airweight. And finally, the hammerless, seen here on the Smith & Wesson 342 Titanium. Now, the hammerless, first off, is a misnomer. There is a hammer, of course, it's internal. The terminology goes back to 1887 or so, when Smith & Wesson introduced the first of these guns, the so-called New Departure Safety Hammerless. It was a top break revolver with low power, 32 and 38 short or 38 S&W. These all happen to be 38 Special. Now, one rationale of the hammerless is that it's snag-free on the draw. The great New York PD Firearms Authority, Paul B. Weston, was the first to point out that the typical hammer spur in a revolver was shaped like a fish hook. And it would have a tendency, as it's coming out of a pocket, to catch in the pocket, to catch on the pants cuff coming out of an ankle holster. Supposedly, when John Wesley Hardin was arrested in the 19th century in Pensacola, Florida, he realized Texas Rangers had found him, said, "Texas, by God," went to draw his gun, and the hammer spur caught on his watch chain, which saved the Texas Rangers' life and cost John Wesley Hardin several years in prison because the Rangers smacked him in the head with his Colt revolver and knocked him out. Now, one problem you have with these, the good news is, for pure marksmanship, you can cock the hammer for that very light, easy, single-action pull that everyone seems to like. The bad news is that light single-action pull is associated with unintended, accidental, and negligent discharges. Look up the case of New York versus Frank Magliato. I worked that case as an expert witness. He had cocked the revolver. He had very poor training, one safety class, to ward off the violent man who was coming at him with a club who had attacked him earlier that night. And when the man raised the club and said, "I've been looking for you," expletive deleted, and began to lunge, he cringed, the shot went off, and struck Anthony Gianni, the deceased, in the center of the forehead. Magliato fled. Flight equals guilt. It became a huge cause célèbre in New York City. They called him the Ferrari Killer because this had begun when Gianni and his doped-up partner had deliberately hit and run Magliato's Ferrari. He was convicted because we were not allowed by the judge to testify as to the justification of having drawn the gun. He was convicted of depraved murder, as I recall, under the New York statute. The Federal Court of Appeals ultimately reduced it to manslaughter. But they said that pointing a gun at someone with a light trigger pull of a cocked revolver such as this was so reckless and negligent that it warranted a manslaughter conviction. The dissenting appellate judge said it was so very reckless it qualified for murder. So that's why, long before I came along, late 60s, early 70s, LAPD had made all their service revolvers double action only. Now, this particular Detective Special has been customized for double action shooting. the hammer spur bobbed off. Good news with it is you can, if you hold your thumb on it, pull the trigger back just enough to drop the cylinder bolt and do a cylinder rotation check to make sure that there's no high primers that are going to buy the cylinder and jam the gun. It's much easier to do on the conventional style revolver because the thumb just has that natural purchase of the hammer spur. Do this slowly, by the way. Don't spin it like on TV. That's hard on the gun. The next that came along, 1950, Colt introduced a hammer shroud that bolted on to cover the spur hammer. And in 1955, Smith & Wesson, their arch competitor, followed with a built-in hammer shroud on the gun they then called the Bodyguard, and in 1957, when they went to numerical designations, it became the Model 38 and the Airweight and the Model 49 in all steel. There was a little nub here that still allowed you to do a cylinder rotation check without touching the trigger. One thing I liked about it was the shape of the hammer shroud here. As the gun wanted to buck up and recoil, it caught the web of the hand and kept it in line. I thought it was kind of the thinking man's version of the J-frame Smith & Wesson at that time. With the typical backstrap here, as recoil begins, if you don't have a really tight grip, the gun can start rolling up in your hand like this, and eventually get to where the web of the hand actually blocks the hammer and it won't shoot. Finally, the true hammerless. It can't be cocked. No one can falsely accuse you of having cocked the hammer and set the stage for a tragic unintended discharge, as the courts found in the Magliotto case. Other things you have with it, the downside, you can't safely do a cylinder rotation check. Without a hammer for your thumb to control, like on the nub you'd have on the Bodyguard, or the back face of the spurless hammer you'd have on this Colt, you simply, it's insane to start pulling the trigger of a loaded gun. So you're going to have to, by vision, when you check the gun and feel, make sure there are no high primers. Now what you have with this, the clean, very streamlined draw. What you also have is, while on the conventional revolver, you'd be holding it down here, and the muzzle has, the bore axis is fairly high above the gun and gives it leverage to rise, which slows you down, of course, on recoil recovery. With this, we can get the web of the hand all the way up to here. See how much more that lowers the bore axis, also forces the wrist to lock a little bit, and you'll find with the same weight gun, the same size gun, same kind of trigger and same ammunition, you'll get distinctly less muzzle rise with this configuration. That's one of the reasons that I went to it. Another reason, I used to carry the Chief Special, the Smith & Wesson version of this design in my early 20s. I liked at that time the idea of being able to cock the hammer for the light, easy trigger pull because I had not yet mastered double action. Once you've done so, single action becomes essentially redundant. Another reason I went to the hammerless, double action only, is this. To me, the small hideout gun is more of a backup gun, a secondary weapon, than it is a primary defensive weapon. Now, what do you use a backup gun for? Maybe your primary gun has been knocked out of your hand or snatched from your holster by an opponent. Maybe it's been hit by a bullet or something like that. Maybe the small gun is where you can access it and the big gun isn't because you're down on your gun hand side and your whole body weight is on top of the gun. I've never personally been in that situation, although I've seen others who have been. What I have been in multiple times is a situation where danger is present. There are two of us there capable of dealing with it, but only one of us is armed. Maybe we were somewhere where one was legal and one was not. Maybe you're with one of the many cops I know who figure they don't need to carry a gun off duty, even though they're trained with a gun. Well, if they know what to do with a gun but they don't have one, they're helpless. They're a liability, not an asset. They're one more person they need to protect. If I can hand that person a gun, my backup gun, that truly is backup. We call these backup guns the spare equipment. Backup is another trained person who knows what to do in a deadly dangerous situation. Two of you together can outflank. Two of you together can practice contact and cover. Two of you together are more than the sum of your parts. I don't want to hand the gun to someone who's been watching too much TV and cocks the hammer and sets the stage for something like Magliotto's unintended shooting. Although Magliotto, in my opinion, should have fired intentionally double action, but that's a story for another day. I'm not going to have time to explain to them how the safety works on this gun. It might be different from theirs. Anyone competent to handle a gun, if I hand them a double action only revolver, point gun, pull trigger, they know what to do with the thing. They're not going to do anything dangerous or stupid with it. If their finger has migrated to the trigger, I have that strong double action trigger pull resistance that's going to minimize the chances, not eliminate, but minimize the chances of a startle response or other cause of an unintended discharge. So for all those reasons, the smoother draw, the better sitting in the hand with a lower bore axis, etc., and the safety elements, for me, the hammerless wound up being the choice. Your needs may be different, and therefore your choice may be different. All we ask, we're not here to tell anybody what to do or what to carry. All we ask is make an informed choice that fits your particular needs. And helping to inform those choices is what Facts in Firearms is here for. I hope to see you down the road in another episode, and we hope to see you back. Thanks.